My name is Thomas Beatty, and I'm an assistant professor here at Virginia Commonwealth University in the School of Education's Department of Educational Leadership. Today I'm going to talk with you about school culture and school climate. Let's first talk about school culture. My question for you today is, what is school culture? I know many people have their beliefs about what school culture is, and sometimes it's interchanged with climate, but I want you to think about school culture. What is school culture? Let me give you a definition, one that I want you to think about. School culture reflects the shared ideas, assumptions, values, and beliefs that give the school its identity and standards for expected behavior. Now that's a real good textbook definition of school culture, but simply put, school culture is, this is the way we do things around here. These are our norms, these are our values, this is how we operate in this school. Now there are components of school culture, and those components are artifacts and symbols, values, and assumptions. Artifacts and symbols are the way the buildings are decorated and maintained. Values look at the manner in which administrators, faculty, and staff function and interact. And assumptions are the beliefs that are taken for granted about human nature. So we're going to talk a little more about those components in a minute or so. School culture doesn't just develop. It doesn't just happen. School culture develops over time. It's maintained by common beliefs and values that key individuals communicate and enforce. You know, there are heroes and heroines whose actions and accomplishments embody those values. There are rituals and ceremonies that reinforce those values, and there are stories that reflect what the school stands for. Now, when we think about those values, let's look at a school culture that impedes learning. Let's go back to artifacts and symbols. Under artifacts and symbols, there is little evidence that reflects an emphasis on children and their education. You walk into a building and you look around and you really don't see much student work, or you don't see that it is a student-friendly building. I can remember when I first became principal of Thompson Middle School, I was from the corporate sector, and I had in my mind what a good building should look like. So I remember I had plants all over the building, and I had gone to Walmart, and there was a sale on prints, and so I bought all of these prints, and I had them framed, and I had them placed throughout the building. And you know, I had pretty flowers sitting around, and so I was so proud of the way the building looked. I even had the shrubbery out front pruned so that it looked so even and nice and nicely manicured. And then I remember it was about the third week of September, there was a meeting being held at the building that afternoon with the Special Ed Advisory Committee, and there were a lot of parents who came in, and I remember hearing one parent saying, "This place doesn't look like a school. It looks like an office building. It looks like a place like where you would go for a doctor's appointment or something." And I remember feeling very disappointed, and so I decided, you know, we need to figure out what a school should look like. I went to visit several high-performing schools, and when I looked in some of those schools, I saw where students' work was posted throughout the building, and that there were paintings that were done by the students, and that you could see that there was evidence of learning centers, and some of those learning centers were in the hallways. And so these are things that people would look at that will tell you that this is something that would support student learning. Another component of school culture that impedes learning are values. When we look at values, we think about decisions that are made without the participation of teachers and parents. We think about values, we think about the principal making decisions by himself, unilateral decisions. No one else is going to be involved in the decision making. And finally, when we think about assumptions, we think about beliefs. We think about students. We think they're lazy and incapable of learning. And parents, we think about our parents. They don't care. They don't want to be partners in education. Those are assumptions that impede student learning. I remember again as a principal, I remember contacting a parent and telling that parent that he had to come to the school today to talk with me about his child. And that parent kept saying to me, Dr. Beatty, I just can't get there. He was insistent that he couldn't get there. And the more he insisted he couldn't get there, the more insistent that I became that he needed to be there. And so finally, the parent told me, well, I can be there, but it's going to take me a few hours to get there. Well, little did I know, the parent didn't have a car. And so that parent lived in one section of Southside, and Thompson Middle School sat in another section of Southside. And so that parent had to catch a bus from that section of Southside where he lived to downtown Richmond, and then he had to transfer to another bus to come to Thompson. And so that did take him a couple of hours to get there. And so after we got to the school, we then had our meeting. But at the end of that meeting, the parent kind of hung around the school, and finally I walked over to him and asked him if I could help him with something. And he said, yes, I need to talk with you. And I could tell he was somewhat embarrassed, but he said to me, I need for you to write a note to my boss, letting my boss know that I was here at the school today. Otherwise, I'm going to be in trouble. I felt so badly for him because I could see this man was demoralized coming to me, asking me for that letter. But I did write the letter, but I remember thinking to myself, it's not that parents don't care. Sometimes economically, it's difficult for them to get there. They have to sometimes make a decision. Do I show up at that school and get docked for several hours and not be able to pay that electric bill? Or do I just go to work and make the money that I need to make to support my family, even though the school may think harshly of me? Let's look at school culture that supports learning. The building and its arrangements reflect the children, their needs, and their accomplishments. And as I said earlier, you walk into a building that supports student learning, you see it, you understand it because it's there, it's right in front of you. When we think about values that support a good school culture and it will support student learning, we think about administrators, teachers, and students, and parents who participate in decision making. Again, at Thompson Middle School, we had a protocol for how decisions were going to be made, and this protocol had levels of decisions. These levels were called level 1, level 2, and level 3. A level 1 decision was a decision where I sat with the school planning and management team, and I said to them clearly, this is a level 1 decision, and so anything you decide, I'm going to go along with it. Even if I don't agree with it, I'm going to go along with your decision. A level 2 decision was a decision where I would bring an issue to the school planning and management team, and I would say to them, I need your best thinking. I need to hear what you have to say about this particular decision, and so, or this particular issue. And so I want you to know that even though I'm going to get your best thinking, ultimately I'm going to make the decision, but I want your input. And a level 3 decision was one where the school planning and management team knew that that was an issue that I would have to keep from the school planning and management team, that was a decision that I would have to make as the principal. And these were issues, things like personnel decisions, such as terminating personnel, or things that would have involved privacy issues of staff members. And so the school planning and management team understood that clearly. When we again think about components of school culture that support learning, let's look again at assumptions. The assumption that we make there is that all students can learn. All parents want their children to succeed, and parents want to be partners in the educational process. Even if they can't be there to be that partner, they still want to be partners in the educational process. I really do believe that all parents want the best for their children. Even if sometimes they don't know how to give it to them, they still want the best for their children. Now that we've talked about school culture, let's talk about school climate. What is school climate? I want you to think for a moment, what is school climate? I know many times that's confused with culture, but it's distinctly different. What is school climate? Well, a good definition that I'll leave you with is that school climate reflects the physical and psychological aspects of the school that are most acceptable to change and that provide the conditions necessary for teaching and learning to take place. Now, remember earlier we talked about school culture as being this is the way we do things around here. Well, school climate, simply put, is this is the way we feel about the way we do things around here. Components of school climate are things such as the appearance and the physical plant, faculty relations, student interactions, leadership decision-making, disciplined environment, learning environment, attitude, school, community relations. These are all components of school climate. Environments that support a good school climate are the physical environment is welcoming and conducive to learning. I remember when I became the principal of Richmond Community High School, that school was initially located in a very old building in the western part of the city. That building was extremely old, and I remember the thing that struck me most is when I first walked into that building, that some of the first thing that I encountered was the smell of the restrooms. And I remember thinking, this is something that our children simply do not deserve. They need to be in a building that's clean, a building where they can breathe, that they wouldn't get used to that smell. And I remember seeing the dirt throughout the building and the spider webs and cobwebs throughout that building. And so I remember I thought the children who are coming to this school deserve much better than this. And so I got with a few people from plant services and I asked them for their help, and they gave it to me, where they sent a crew of 25 custodial workers in, and they worked in that building for 4 weeks until we got that old building clean and fresh for the students before they came back. A good school climate promotes a good social environment. It promotes communication and interaction. The effective environment promotes a sense of belonging and self-esteem. And the academic environment promotes learning and self-fulfillment. A physical environment that impedes learning is one where students are harassed by other students. They go to the teacher for help, and the teacher just will say something to them like, well, ignore him, or move your seat. Classrooms are disorganized, or worse yet, classrooms are held in rooms not intended for that use. I remember when I first became principal of Thompson, there was a classroom that was held in a room off of the cafeteria. This classroom was a storage room. It had been a custodial storage area because there was a sink there for cleaning the mops. And I remember looking in that room, and there were desks and a portable chalkboard there, but I remember looking and seeing roaches in that room. But what I thought was just horrible is that we have children in this room learning, but what was even more horrible was that I found out that the children who were assigned to that room were children with special needs, children with disabilities, the most helpless of our students who were being placed in a situation that I thought was absolutely criminal. A physical environment that supports learning is an environment where students feel safe, and they are safe. If there are situations that come up, there are measures in place to address those things. We know that children will have conflicts, and so an environment that supports learning would be one where we put those measures in place to address those conflicts. Classrooms are orderly, and the classrooms and grounds are clean and well maintained, and areas for instruction and activities are appropriate for those uses, and staff members have sufficient textbooks and supplies, and that these things are not things that seem like they're commodities that are difficult to get, but that the principal is making sure that those supplies and the materials that the staff needs are there for them. A social environment that impedes learning is that interaction is limited, teachers are isolated from each other, and students self-segregate, and parents are not treated as equals. In many situations in a social environment that impedes learning, many times we see parents who are more vocal are treated much better than parents who are not as vocal, or parents who are more affluent are treated much better than parents who are not as affluent. This really is very unfair because everyone should be treated as equals. In an environment, a social environment that impedes learning, All decisions are made by central office or they're made by the principal without teacher or parent involvement. Students have no role in determining classroom or building activities and decisions. Bullying and conflicts are ignored. As I said before, when a child goes to a teacher for help, that child, in many instances, gets ignored. A social environment that promotes learning is that interaction is encouraged and teachers and students actively communicate. The principal will design that master schedule such that teachers have opportunities to plan together, to work together, to really look at what it is they can do for children and helping them move ahead. Teachers are collegial and student groupings are diverse. Parents and teachers are partners in the educational process. Decisions are made with the participation of others, and staff members are open to student suggestions, and students have opportunities to participate in decision making. Staff and students are trained to prevent or resolve conflicts. An effective environment that promotes a sense of belonging and self-esteem is one where interaction of teachers and staff with all students is caring and responsive, and supportive, and respectful. Students trust the teachers and staff, and morale is high among the teachers and staff. Staff and students are friendly, and the school is open to diversity and welcoming to all cultures. Parents perceive the school as warm, inviting, and helpful, and there is a strong sense of community. I know that many times you walk into a school, may walk into your child's school, and you can just feel the warmth, you can feel the care, you can feel that sense of learning and of accomplishment when you walk into their school. There's a strong sense of community. An academic environment that supports learning and self-fulfillment is one where there is an emphasis on academics, and all types of intelligence and competence are respected and supported. Teaching methods respect the different ways children learn. Expectations are high for all students. All are encouraged to succeed, and progress is monitored regularly, and results of assessments are properly communicated to parents. Results of assessments are used to evaluate and redesign teaching procedures and content. Teachers are confident and knowledgeable. An academic environment that impedes learning and self-fulfillment, that results are not used to improve teaching and learning. Sometimes teachers will look at the results that a child has, and he will just record those results in the grade book and move on. Teachers and students repeat the same cycle to failure. Academic performance is downplayed and not rewarded, and teaching methods do not allow for a variety of learning. You know, sometimes teachers look at something and they may say to you that old saying of, I've been teaching for 30 years. And my question to them is, have you been teaching for 30 years, or have you taught that 1 year 30 times? Because you haven't changed the way that you've been teaching. You haven't allowed for the variety of learning that's taking place, the variety of learning styles. Expectations are low, and some students are just expected to fail. There is minimal or no periodic assessments, and there's little communication about the results of assessments, and students do not know how to improve their performance, and parents discover their children are struggling academically, as I said earlier, only at report card time. Teachers are unsure and underprepared. School culture and climate are useful terms for intangibles that can affect learning. As such, they deserve serious attention in an effort to improve performance in our schools. This is something that we deserve. This is something that all of our schools deserve. This is something that children really deserve. Thank you.